So welcome everyone. My name is Jan Cherie Morse. I am a program manager here at the Family Violence Prevention and Services program. Today I have with me one of my colleagues, Holly. I'll let her introduce herself and some of the fabulous people we have from the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. So today we're going to talk about vicarious trauma, but before we do that, I want to introduce my colleague, Holly, if she wants to go ahead and introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Holly Dahl. I am a management analyst here at the Office of Family Violence Prevention Services.
Thank you. And then I will let, I guess, Gabriella, if you want to introduce yourself and then popcorn it to someone else.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Hey, everyone. I'm Gabriela Zapata Alma. I'm the Associate Director of the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. I'm so glad to be here with my two colleagues. I will pass it over to Jamie.
Hello, everyone. My name's Jamie Wilson. I'm a training and technical assistance specialist with the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. And I will pass it on to Amanda.
Hello, everybody. My name is Amanda Lyon, and I'm also a training and technical assistance specialist with the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. And I'm very excited to be part of this wonderful group today.
Awesome. Thank you. So I guess maybe we can start off with what people are like, what is vicarious trauma? What does that mean? So I guess we can kind of give a basic definition and I'll give my version of it. And if anybody else wants to chime in, probably to give the real definition of vicarious trauma. For me, vicarious trauma is just having to take on traumas of others, especially if you're working in certain environments. And I guess for this, we're specifically talking about sexual assault survivors or domestic violence victims. For us as people who are doing those frontline work and working with survivors and victims, they are dealing with their own traumas. And sometimes you can kind of take that on just by working in that field. And you kind of develop your own traumas from that as well. So that's my definition, I guess, for layman terms, but if anybody else wants to chime in and kind of give the definition of vicarious trauma.
Yes, thank you. So one of the ways that we tend to think about it is the ways that we are impacted when we are truly open and present with folks who we are trying to help out. And so we know that we are working with folks, that we're here to support folks because they've experienced some abuse and some victimization, and that when we can be really present with them, that's incredibly healing, and that we can also be impacted. And that when we are aware of the ways in which we can be impacted, then our organizations can make some mistakes, like punishing what's actually a secondary trauma effect, where we need to be doing the opposite, which is really building out a culture of supporting all of our staff, because it's really, really normal and natural to be impacted when we're open and present with folks.
Yeah, and so that's I like how you said that, but can you, I guess, expound on what you mean by punishment? Is that like towards the staff if they're acting out on certain things that that could trigger them or they picked up from dealing with this population?
Yeah, so for example, some of the ways that secondary trauma can show up is having a hard time doing our work, having a hard time concentrating, having a hard time focusing, maybe needing more sick time, right? And if an organization isn't aware and actively working to prevent and address secondary trauma, then a lot of times what ends up happening is that people are quote unquote held accountable for things that have nothing to do with accountability and everything to do with the very normal effects of secondary trauma. And when I say normal, I should say maybe the predictable effects of secondary trauma.
Okay, so that is interesting to hear that. specifically because I want to say there are some times where you or anyone working in this field can take on that trauma, and it will impact their work. And it may be a deadline that you didn't meet because you are unconscious or subconsciously dealing with something else, or triggered a trauma by the person, one of the clients that you're dealing with. And so, yeah, that could play out in the workforce. And as supervisors who are maybe not aware of vicarious trauma, as opposed to like having a conversation with the staff saying, hey, well, let's talk about it, or maybe you need to take some time off and work through some of the things that you're going through. There is like a sense of, we're just going to punish you because you didn't make this deadline. So that's good that you bring that up. What are some of the things that you may like recommend for setting the space before working with this population, before the day or end of the day? Or do you have any recommendations?
I could jump in here a little bit. I think it's really important to think about how we are being intentional with starting our day and setting up our space. And I like to think a lot about like our daily rituals, like how do we step into our space in both like opening and closing, like not just jumping, sitting down, jumping right into the work, but do I have a routine? What do I look at first? Do I make sure that I am taken care of? Sometimes I laugh at myself because like, well, do I have like my water? Do I have my tea? Do I have, my aromatherapy? Do I have like my
nice.
self-care pieces? Yeah. Like
Yeah.
what's in place for me, for my own support, before I even start diving into work that's, potentially going to take an emotional toll of some sort.
And it is important for me. I know for me, I wouldn't say I'm like a routine person, but I do like my tea. I need to incorporate aromatherapy. That's actually not a bad idea. Although I don't have clients in this position that I am in, but still, sometimes dealing with green teas can be a little overwhelming. So it's good to have those. And aromatherapy is something that I just wrote down, so I will definitely try that. Anyone else have any like recommendations and of something that they may do as far as to help them?
Yeah, I do. Oh. You want to go ahead, Holly?
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was going to say too, it's not just like employees or employers that sometimes need that training, or our supervisors. Sometimes our families need to know too, or understand that we have that vicarious trauma, or that those in the field have it, because sometimes it's hard not to take that home with you. Or if you're in that, maybe you've just had a really rough day or something triggered you, for them to kind of have that understanding. For when I'm in the field, or when I was in the field, I would always listen to music on my way home, very loudly in my car, and sing very loudly in my car. Not that everybody wanted to hear, but
the whole concert.
That's what I always tell everybody. It's a free concert starring me. But it was a relief also, because just, it felt like I was getting something out. And probably a lot of deep breathing too, because I hit some really high notes. But the music as well. Sometimes soothing music, sometimes, really fast music, just to get some of those thoughts out of there. To where I came home and felt a little relieved, or didn't feel so stressed or traumatized from what I just experienced during the day.
Nice. Well, now there's a lot of people may not commute, and so they may just have a concert in their own home and listen to music loudly. I do find myself playing it's not like a white noise, but it's nature sounds, like water running, water running, or streams, or something like streams, thunderstorms, rain, that's pretty soothing and calming to me. So I do like that. And Jamie, I think you had.
Yeah. Definitely music has been a go-to for me as well, either before or after work, while I'm commuting. When I was going into the office, um, I liked to take the scenic route or the long way, to avoid, the traffic on the expressway, as well as to just kind of decompress on my way to and from work. But I would also add that something that I noticed that I was doing a lot, working as an advocate, was I was keeping my work phone on all night long and checking it after hours, and even when I wasn't on call. And I would respond, and my clients knew that I would respond. And so at some point I had to start setting boundaries, not just for my clients, but for myself, and say, okay, at 4:30, 5 o'clock, it's time to, turn your phone on silent, and disconnect in that way. And so what I would do is I would set up there, there's settings on your phone that you can manage, where you can accept calls from certain people.
Do not disturb.
Right.
I have that.
Yes. So you can accept calls from certain people, or have it to set up where people typically, if they're panicked, or if it's an emergency, they'll call you more than once. So you can have it set up to where if the same number calls you 2 or 3 times in a row,
It'll go through.
ring. Yeah. And so that way it relieves you of the stress. So you don't, because I can't speak for everybody, but I know that a lot of advocates tend to, really care about the people that they work with and other people in general. And so that takes some of that stress off of you and guilt off of you, feeling like you're not accessible or there if something does go wrong. But it's also giving you a break at the same time and allowing you to separate work from personal life better.
Yeah, and it was something that I was reading before about setting boundaries. You can set them, but you have to also like stand on them. And I like what you said, Jamie, where you said, I set the boundary and then I said, do not disturb on my phone. So, and you stand on them, because I guess also we need time. We need our own time. And I do realize that when you come into this type of work, especially dealing with victims and survivors of sexual assault, this is definitely one of those topics that is super sensitive, and we come into this work because we want to help, but we also can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
Yes, we only have one us. It's no, I can't be replaced. So.
I love to use the airplane analogy. With people that I work with, just reminding them, like, if you're on an airplane and the plane's going down and that mask drops down in front of you, they always tell you to put your mask on first and then help the people around you, because if everybody's trying to help other people, we're all gonna pass out. So
No, true.
at some point you have to help yourself before you can help others. Like you said, you can't pour from an empty cup. So
Yes. and the piece going back to boundaries and taking care of ourselves, sometimes a sign of secondary trauma might be having a hard time maintaining some of those boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is something that people at one point or another find themselves kind of, wondering like, hey, wait, I had set this up in a certain way and I'm having a hard time keeping that boundary. And that might be one of those kind of early pink flags of really, it's important to slow down and take some time for yourself. And then, there's so many different things out there that we can do that help us to reset, help us to really clear some of that secondary trauma or process some of it, digest some of it. And sometimes the hardest thing is actually deciding that we are worth investing in and to not abandon ourselves.
Oh my gosh, that's so good.
I love the investment.
Yes.
If we're not investing in ourselves and taking care of ourselves, we can't take care of anyone else. And I know for me as an advocate and in the field, or in that role as an advocate, I should say, as Jan Cherie said, we do this work because we want to help others, right? And that was always my focus. I put me to the side, and I still sometimes catch myself doing that, but to the point that then you can't take care of yourself. So I think investing in yourself is a great investment, because then look at all the great things that other people who need that help can get.
And it's funny, I sometimes take cues from one of my friends. He's such an amazing person. I love him, but I would say he is I call him selfish sometimes, but I get it. He puts himself first often. And so he understands his worth. And while he does like law enforcement, he's a law enforcement officer. He really does understand his self. Like he is I'm worth investing in myself, and I'm going to take this time out to exercise. And wait, you need a ride where? Well, it has to wait because I have to make sure that I invest in myself. So I love the fact Gabriella said, understanding your worth. Oh, it's taken me a long time to kind of figure out my own worth and am I enough? So I get it. It's hard to invest. Even like Kylie said, sometimes you find yourself slipping back into the same routine of not putting yourself first. And I forgot to put my oxygen mask on this time, and I need to help. So it's amazing. And I always ask, like, are there any tips with us to try to protect ourselves? Do you all have any tips that we can provide advocates? Because they do this important work, and we talk about vicarious trauma, and they're like, well, I get it. We have it. What tips do we have so that we don't have to always experience this and we can learn our own worth and put ourselves first?
I think one of the really important things is that, aside from, how we invest in ourselves or care for ourselves outside of the workplace is, coming back to, it's like, what is our organizational culture? And looking at, am I encouraged to take a lunch break? Am I encouraged to take breaks during the day? Do I feel like I have space after I have maybe a more intense interaction, or if I'm digesting, intense material or a webinar? Do I feel like I can take time to step away and, maybe I need to have a cup of tea. Maybe I need to, take a breath outside. Do you have opportunities to process and talk with other people within the workplace, with opportunities maybe for supervision, or how else does your workplace culture support wellness? And some of that is also, it's so important, because when we think of self-care, sometimes that idea of, investing in ourselves just feels like a greater and greater burden. It can feel hard. And we have that kind of workplace culture and the organizational support. I think that's really, really helpful for a lot of people, because it has to be not just our own personal responsibility. It has to be a shared responsibility, and that, you know, those larger expectations that, yes, we are all here, we are all taking care of each other, we are all taking care of ourselves. And that is what, you know, where there's a lot of value, because that's how we do our work.
Absolutely. That organizational culture piece is so important. And I often say to myself, as someone working within an organization, and even though our organization, for the most part, doesn't provide direct services, we still can experience secondary trauma because of the kinds of support that we're offering. And these are things that we all need regardless, right? So I often remind myself, people know how to take care of themselves when they have the space and the time to do so. And so if somebody really needs some support with figuring out some things that they can try, then I'm absolutely here to support that conversation and that exploration. But that what people really need from me as a leader is to create that space and that time and those resources for people to engage in that self-care.
Yeah, and it is like a top-down. I agree, it is a top-down. I worked at a nonprofit organization once, but it's American Psychological Association, and I just remember them always reminding us about taking mental health days. While we weren't dealing directly with the public, anything you do is going to require you to focus on something, and you do need to take breaks. Even if that means you're scrolling through TikTok for a long time, you still need a break from it. But I do like the fact that they, from the top down, created a culture of it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to take care of yourself. Put yourself first is important. So it is a top down type thing. I usually tell my staff that, you know, my only expectation is self-care. Really, I mean, you're gonna get the work done, but because I know that you're here for a reason and a purpose, and you're good workers. But I just want you to take care of yourself. And it was another question I couldn't remember that I had, but I wasn't sure if anybody else had tips.
You know, one thing that comes to mind for me here that I would really encourage everyone to do is just that spending time with ourselves and that self-awareness and getting to know. I often think about heaters and coolers. What are the things that kind of like heat me up and activate me in a way that feels uncomfortable? And then what are the things that really help to cool and soothe me and can help kind of bring that temperature down? And so that's going to be different for everyone, right? There are some things that have absolutely been activating for really dear colleagues that I have been like, oh, okay, that's activating for them. So how can I support, since I'm not activated around that, how can I be a resource and a support in this moment? And then other times where it was the total opposite, where I was the one that was really having the kind of ongoing stories, almost like sometimes I feel like it's like it becomes like an echo chamber inside of me, like it still kind of keeps swirling around inside of me, right? And then at that point, engaging and having a sense of what are the things that are my coolers? What are the things that really help me to move through, right? And not abandon myself, stay present with myself, but be able to process and move through some of these experiences that I'm holding on to. And so for a lot of us, that's going to be just staff support and having just someone to talk to who gets it and who can listen and validate and hold it with us. And other times it's things like, you know, I love water. Even the simple act of like being able to wash my hands, drink some water, splash some water on my face, all of that are coolers for me.
Well, that's interesting. I love water, not to the sense I want to splash it on my face, but I love definitely love water. I love water, not the beach, but it's weird. People like, you like water, but not the beach. I like to be on a boat in the water. The sand is not a friend of mine. But just like I said, listening to the sounds of like rain, which I do on my phone also is something that helps as a cooler. Yes, it is a cooler. Does anyone, I guess, do they have any kind of like lived experiences that you may want to account for? Maybe there's a time where you felt like, oh my gosh, I think I just took on this client a little too much, held it too personal. I don't have an example. I do have an example of something that I've read, but I wanted to give anybody else a chance to kind of give their own lived experiences as an advocate.
I can jump in there. This
Okay.
is Jamie. One of the hardest times for me as an advocate was about 2017. I was working with survivors of human trafficking, and many of those survivors were foreign national people that were pursuing immigration relief related to trafficking. And so if you're unfamiliar with that process, long story short, human trafficking survivors can get either a T or U visa. Both allow for
like
the
a pathway to
person
citizenship
to remain in the country. Yes.
Yeah.
And the process can take, depending on which visa you're going for. Historically, it took T visas took about 18 months and U visas took about 3 to 5 years. Well, in 2017, that time period not only extended, but there was a change that stated if someone was denied, or their application was denied, then they would be automatically referred to Homeland Security for deportation, something similar to that.
Yeah.
So we had to talk to our clients and explain their rights, but also explain to them what happens if someone comes to their door, you know, and who they can call, just a whole safety plan around that situation, because we knew that it was very real for them, that, you know, any day someone could come knocking on their door if they were
yeah, that's
denied.
real fear. That's real, living in real fear. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're working with people who have not only been exploited here, but have been hurt and exploited in their home country. So it's not safe for them to return there. But they also have families, they have children that are here, you know, and so it was very, very stressful and honestly quite scary. And their fear was palpable. And so I had to consciously do things to decompress after meeting with those particular clients, because it was just so hard to, you know, be supportive and provide information, but not, you know, show how much it was affecting me as well. And some of the things I would do, going back to disconnecting from my phone, but also just making sure that I was doing things that brought me peace and joy. Water for me too is something that was very helpful. So I started swimming. I did laps at the local YMCA. And so, you know, even with people that are on the lower income or lower spectrum of the income, lower end of the income spectrum, sorry. The YMCA can be a great option if exercise and swimming, things like that, are good or helpful to you. Because we know Advocates aren't the wealthiest, so
Right,
we
right.
we need to come up with some
That's
options,
vicarious trauma within itself. You're right.
right? So I would encourage people to look at their local YMCA's if that is something that they're interested in, because they do have um, programs where you can get a reduced membership or even a free membership, depending on the size of your family. And so just taking care of yourself in those ways, doing things that allow you to just kind of zone out and just be and breathe and just relax and let all of that tension and that fear and that anxiety go. Um, is very important during those times, because we're not always going to have the answer. We're not always going to be able to fix everything. So we have to do the best we can. And that means taking care of ourselves as much as we take care of others.
Yeah. And so that's a good example. We do the best that we can. We can't win everything. But this has been great, everyone. I do always, like with my podcast, I end with one question, just a lighter note. Ask everyone, if you were stuck on a deserted island, what is the one album that you would bring and listen to? And you're not gonna be stuck forever, just maybe for a week. What's that one album that you would listen to?
Ooh, I know for me, like it's just right there. Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life.
Oh, that was a good one. Yeah.
That's a great one.
Yes, that was a good one. Anyone else?
This is super
For
hard
me, it's
me.
always going to be REO Speedwagon, but I would say probably the High End Fidelity album.
Okay. Is that what you screamed in your car on your way home, Holly?
Usually it is, and it's like one of the concerts I've went to since I was a young kid, and my kids even go every time they're on tour. So yeah,
awesome. All right, Jamie, you still thinking? You said it was hard.
Well, yes.
Okay.
I have one now.
Okay.
I love music, all kinds of music, but one of my favorite artists is Mariah Carey. And so I would listen, So I would listen to probably the Fantasy album.
Ooh.
Just because of where it takes me back to in my mind, the space I was at. It was one of my freest, most innocent phases in life. And so, and it's definitely a staple. I still listen to it all the time.
Nice. All right. How about you, Amanda?
When I think about like, if I could have a week on a desert island.
Yeah, I know.
That sounds wonderful. I think I would rather just like have quiet. Let's just listen to the ocean. Let me just listen to the ocean for a week.
Okay.
Maybe there's some birds. I'm just imagining. It's like
so your album is nature sounds.
Just nature. I think that'd make me perfectly happy.
All right, good. I like it. I like it. All right. Well, this has been fun. And hopefully we could do more of these. Well, we will eventually do more of these, but I really do appreciate everyone joining us today for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and just giving advocates a chance to get some tips and a voice to help themselves when they're dealing with their vicarious trauma. Any last minute thoughts, words, anything that you want to say before we end?
I'll just say to all of you doing the work out there, working with survivors, just keep doing the work and remember that you are important. The people that you're helping appreciate you, even if you don't hear it every day. You're doing great work, and just keep taking care of yourself the way you take care of others.
I agree. Sometimes you're the only one that takes the time to listen to them, so you make a huge change whether you know it or not.